Hi everyone, let's deal with our second last lecture. We are in week 12. So this week we're looking at three main areas. The first one is very simplistic behaviour and your impact in the classroom on behaviour of children, the environment and how you set that up, and we're looking at all the other things, not just the physical environment, and human resources. So the people that you want to have involved in your early years classroom. So if we look at this idea that the art of teaching is the art of assisting discovery, that's why we've spent quite a bit of time talking about things like provocations, learning experiences, and so on. We want to make sure that we're providing the best experiences for our children. In order to do that, we need to manage the behaviour effectively in our room. And you need to make sure that whatever you're doing with behaviour maps to the school policies and your own personal philosophies as well. So when we're working with the early years, the first thing we want to make sure is that we actually plan to avoid the problems before they even occur. And that's why we spend so much time thinking about our transitions, thinking about how we develop good relationships, thinking about how we organise our physical environment so that we have a clear line of sight as much as possible for different things, how we organise things to provide the best experiences for children. So our key considerations, number one, those ideas of healthy relationships with the children, but also with their wider caregivers and community as well. Number two, we think, what do we want to see represented in our classroom? So we make the rules. We have to be really aware of the things that we are praising and rewarding, and make sure that we're praising and rewarding the good behaviour, not the negative behaviour. Oftentimes, especially as a new grad, I see a lot of teachers fall into the habit of rewarding the bad behaviour by constantly calling out and allowing the child to do those behaviours, and then we're rewarding it by giving them the attention. So think, how do you make sure that you are praising the good behaviour? And then providing lots and lots of structures and schedules, and really planning ahead, making sure that we're not being disorganized, because that does come across to the children. So we're providing every structure. And when we say structures, we don't just mean the essential elements, but all of those other little things. So how do you get them on the mat? How do you move them from the mat to outside? How do they sit when they're having their fruit time? What's their rules that you have regarding touching different things? What are they allowed to have autonomy over versus what do they have to ask permission for? Can they just go to the toilet? Do they need to ask? All those structures and schedules. So plan ahead so that way you're thinking about all of the things that could potentially go wrong and the things that you actually want to see replicated all the time. Now, most of the time you will be working as a team. You more than likely, if you're working in a pre-kindy, a kindy or pre-primary, you're probably going to have an EA. If you're working in a childcare setting, you'll definitely have other people in the room with you. So you want to be able to work as a team with the caregivers of the children as well. So you want to make sure that you're providing the best experiences for the children and for everyone else that comes into your vicinity as well. So this is where you need to think, how do you make sure that all of your planning documentation, so when we're working as an undergraduate, we have lesson plans and forward planning documents. When we're working as somebody who is a teacher that has their own classroom and has graduated, we're working with our daily work pads and our overall planning documents of some sort. So how are you planning to prevent those issues? So making sure that you think ahead and think, that could be a problem, and work out how are you going to avoid those. So things that could cause behaviour issues. First of all, you've got transitions. So if you are silly enough to have them all quiet on the mat and then you say, off you go and run outside. Yeah, you're going to have kids run. You're going to have kids throw things. You're going to have kids stomp on one another and so on. So think your transitions. How do you organise them? Send them a group away at a time. Send everyone with the white socks to head off. With your transitions, if you're getting them to move group by group, avoid the boys and girls thing. It's just causing problems now. I always think about colour of their hair, colour of their eyes, something they're wearing. Do they have ribbons in their hair? Think of something that allows you to differentiate from one child to the next. I often use the first letter of their names or different letters or different sounds as well. So you're reinforcing literacy at the same time. You might have everyone who has already turned 4, everyone who turns 4 in September, and use their birthdays and things. So when you move them from one place to the other, think about how you're going to do that in a sane, sensible way that does not require you to have a little rest afterwards because it's gone pear-shaped. So think about your equipment and your materials. So sometimes certain materials can really hype the kids up. I know whenever we brought out the Lego, that was something that the kids get really excited about. Whenever we set up certain things outside, we had seesaws and things like that they just loved, but we didn't set them up all the time. So we knew that they were the things they needed to learn how to play with appropriately. And so we would put them out sometimes and put nice firm rules around them. And then they were the special things that we had all the time. So think, do you have the little pegs that are only 4 pegs on a particular learning centre? And when those 4 pegs are all pegged onto their shirt, there's 4 different people in that learning centre, then no more people can go into that learning centre. So think about how you're going to organise your room so that the children are going to be safe with all of the equipment. How are you going to ensure when you change locations? So that's that idea about your transitions from one place to another as well. So if you're moving around the school in a school environment, do you want them to be silent? Do you want them to line up? Don't do that to yourself when you're in the first part of a pre-kindy because they don't know what you mean. So think, how do you move them from one place to the other? And it might be that we all hold hands and then we walk in a big long snake. So think, how do you make those things happen in the most sensible and sane way for yourself? How do we ensure that we have messy activities that don't go from one end of the classroom to the other? So invest in tarpaulins, invest in some cones that can be set up in different places so it makes clear boundaries for things. With your messy activities, you have spare clothes for all the children all the time. So make sure that you set those up first. That avoids any of your problems. And there are things that excite the children. So I know we had often used bubble blowing. Oh my goodness, they get so excited. So think, how do you create the best circumstances for the children to thrive, but make sure that they're not going nuts at the same time? And when you have visitors or different people come into the room, sometimes it can really hype the kids up. I found that when I had dads come in on duty, that would always be something that would hype them up. So I would learn to actually, if I saw that a dad was coming up on my duty roster, I would actually plan different outdoor activities where the dads could do a little bit more of the rough and tumble, and we'd play chasey and we'd play tag and we'd do different things. I'd get the big balls out. We'd have the big giant gym fit balls and play with those and so on. So capitalize rather than trying to squash. Know that what is going to happen and then work with it rather than trying to stop it. The thing that I really found frustrating was, particularly in my kindy classroom, a change in routine. School photo day was always a little bit annoying. Making sure that on the days that you had the sports carnival, the swimming carnival, if you do happen to have swimming lessons, I remember in year 1, that change in routine of swimming lessons was really hard for some kids. If you've got any children who have autism, that becomes something really tricky when you have a change in routine. So make sure that you've got your visual timetables set up so that way it avoids lots of your behaviour issues. You will know the children who will have issues, work out how you create the best environment for them. And then moving on from our behaviour considerations, let's think about our environment, not the whole environment. You've already done a whole unit on that. So what are your considerations? You've got to think about what is the space that you have in your centre, what are the needs of your children that you're working with, And what learning centres do you like to have set up, and what do the children like to have set up? So think about how you consider each of those three aspects. And of course, make sure that you have a little look at your National Quality Framework for the types of things that you need to have set up in your environment that they recommend, and obviously your early years learning framework for the types of environments and the organisational modes that will create the best way for the children to learn. So when you have your environment, think about how you want to set that up so that you are maximising the learning potential for you and the children. The thing that I wanted to spend a little bit more time on today is this idea of human resources. So when we're working in an early years room, we're not often working in isolation. So let's think about what are our human resources. So we've got our education assistant. You might have your special needs EA, and you'll probably have some parent helpers. You might even be in a room that has a shared teaching load. So if you're in a childcare centre, there'll be a number of workers that will be with you. If you're in a pre-kindy, you'll probably just have your EA and yourself. If you're in a pre-primary, you might not have an EA all the time. You might have yourself and an EA 3/4 of the time or half of the time. If you're in a year 2 room, you might not have an EA at all. You might just have somebody for one morning once a week. So if you have tension in your room, that will come across to the children and to the parents as well. So you want to make sure that you create that nice, relaxing, welcoming environment between all of your staff members. Now, I know it's really tricky working with different people, but you have to be the bigger person, regardless of whether your EA is a 60-year-old woman who's a bit cranky at that time of her life. You have to work out how do you make that work in your environment to create the best learning atmosphere for the children. So when we're thinking about that management idea, it's your responsibility to plan for the human resources in your classroom. And that applies just as much when you're on prac as well. So when you're on prac, if you're working in an early years room, you want to make sure that you are thinking which EAs are available and what are they going to be doing. They like to be part of the planning as well. So think, how do you make sure that you are being really clear on what is everyone's roles and duties? Not being an absolute cow about it, but making sure that you are not dominating, but you are still being assertive and explaining what your role is and what your duties are and what their role is and what their duties are. So you want to be really clear and think, how do you clearly define the role of the class EA? So what is going on? The class EA's role is not to be your personal assistant. They are the educational assistant. It means they're working with the children. So you don't want them to have their whole world wrapped up in cutting up the fruit, setting up the paint, cleaning up the paint, cleaning up outside, setting up outside. You want them to be working with the children. One of my pet hates is walking into the photocopy room and seeing the EA standing there photocopying 1,000,001 things. It's not their role to do all of your personal work. It's their role to work with the children. And they have usually done quite extensive training to be able to work effectively with children. Their role is not to sit there and spend 2 hours every week doing all of your photocopying. You can do that yourself as well. So think, how do you create that right environment that you are truly working as a team? So they're not your gopher to go and do things for you. So you, as the teacher in the classroom, you have that responsibility to lead the team and express concerns and so on. You have to make sure that you are very open and that you have started to understand how your interpersonal skills will affect other people. You want to be able to develop that really deep feeling of trust and respect with one another so that you're making sure you are not telling someone what to do and them not understanding why. So you want to be able to ensure that you are always discussing the rules, the routines, your behavior management strategies, what you want them to help you with, what you want to be able to do by yourself, because sometimes they might inadvertently do things for you and you're like, but I like to do that. That's my thing, and so on. Now, if you see a parent asking EA educational questions, it's important to always keep in mind that you have the duty of care in that classroom. You are the person that is responsible for all of the educational development of the students in your room. So that means that if an EA is being asked educational questions that are beyond, what reading book, why, have we changed the reading books, when is library day, all those sorts of things, then you need to make sure that you are consistent with parents so that they understand you are the person responsible. Because when the parent might ask an EA a question, the EA might tell them an answer, then the parent's not happy with that and they go and speak to your leadership team. You don't want to be left out of the loop of any of that, because it will be you who gets questioned quite sternly about why this has happened and so on. So you want to make sure you are working as a team with your EA. And again, your EA is not your personal assistant. Your EA is the educational assistant for the classroom. So that means you work together to make sure the best experiences are created for the children. Now, if you have children with particular needs in your classroom, there's often professional learning that is available. And oftentimes it's offered only to the teacher. But I know that by having a chat with my leadership team and saying, I would love to go to this with my EA, or there's 2 different days, can I go to one and my EA go to the other? That really does a lot to help your EA feel that they're part of the team. So really encourage them to attend professional learning in some way. So make sure that, again, you're not just getting them to do all the prep and pack away. They're not your slave, and it gets really old really quick. So make sure your assistant feels valued. Make sure that they are working with the children and that they're feeling really valued about what's going on in the classroom. Now, don't dominate, but also don't allow your EA to dominate you. I have seen this quite a number of times with young women who come out, and that sometimes the older EAs feel they can tell you what to do. Take their advice, but don't let them tell you what to do. Remember that you have had all of your time at uni, all of your time in classrooms already. You want to work as a team to create the best things for the children. And the reality is that success in teaching really does make a massive difference, because it's your ability to work with others. So working in schools, it's all about relationships. And we all know that that can be the reason you get up in the morning, but it can also be the reason you want to put the covers back over your head and go back to sleep. So think about how you are impacting on others and have those open conversations with people that you work with now, even to find out what do you do really well and what are you struggling with, particularly as some of you might even be working at leadership level. If you're at Woolies or something, you might be the manager of a section. So think about and really delve into how well do you work with others. So when we're getting started, as the teacher moving into your room in a couple of years' time, make the first move, chat with them, arrange early to go and meet with them, go for a coffee, meet at the school, bring them in some cookies that you've baked or something like that. Make the first move and then start to outline what are your roles in the classroom. So you might ask them, what did you do last year when you were working with so-and-so? And then find out what they like to do and say, oh, okay, did that make you happy? Is there something you wanted to try out differently? So ask them some questions about what they want to do. They might even know a few things about the children that are coming into your classroom the following year. So think always you've got that idea of you're working as a team. So you need to talk about your beliefs and your routines. So to have a team, you have to have the same core values. It's a bit like when you're working with a partner and you're thinking about raising children together, or even when you're with a partner and you've got the same dog. You've got to be working on who disciplines, who says this, who does this, and so on. So work out what are your beliefs and routines. So find out what your EA is really good at. So you might have this hidden gem of an absolute gun who loves doing art, and she will be able to make the most amazing displays for you. Or it could be that she is phenomenal at working with children who have autism. So find out what is their thing. And you want to be really clear, but not dominate. So think about what is your responsibility regarding assessment and reporting. do you feel comfortable with them doing some of those tasks? I know I certainly did with most of the EAs that I ever worked with. I would divvy up different things, but there were certain things that were just items that I wanted to be part of the assessment and so on, because I wanted to see how the children did it and so on. And then this idea of your personal philosophy and your routines and your procedures, all of those form how your classroom will work. So think, how are you going to be open and honest about it? Now, when we're looking at all of our people resources, families are part of that people resource. Because what we know is that if we can work together with our families, it creates a much better environment. Now, when we're thinking about families, we have a whole entire course on this in 4th year, so we spend a lot of time looking at how we involve families. But for the purpose of this, let's think about our main things. You set the tone for what you want the parents to be doing and comfortable with in the classroom. They should improve what's going on. They shouldn't create chaos. Yes, but we know sometimes they do. Now, one of the things that I always did in my kindy class was my first 4 weeks of kindy, I didn't have any parents in the room for the whole session. I wanted to create that nice environment where I was comfortable with children, they were comfortable with each other, and then we introduced the parents. So the parents did the drop off and then we sent them on their way. The children then were with us for the rest of the session, and then the parents came and picked them up. After 4 weeks, then I would set my timetable up, and not even every session would I have parents there. And that way it was helping the children to create that knowledge that school is, this is what we do, and mummy is there to pick me up and take me home, and that mummy doesn't have to stay every single session, because some children have great anxiety at different things. So think, what is the routine that you want to have? Some people are very comfortable after the first week having people in. I found with kindy and pre-kindy, they need a little bit more settle-in time. With pre-primary, absolutely, after a week or so, you can definitely start to get the parents in. But you make that decision about what you're comfortable with. And I'll obviously be aware of COVID and all of those sorts of school policies that you might have. So when you're getting started with parents, find out, are you actually going to be able to have some parents? I find that my higher socioeconomic schools often have both parents working, and sometimes in my low socioeconomic as well. So find out, do you have enough? You don't want to count on having parents there and then you actually have a parent community that doesn't feel comfortable coming in or can't for whatever reason. So think you might only have a couple of days a week in pre-primary that you have, and they might be your days where you do more active things, or it might be the days where you know that you can have a bit more sensory activities because you're going to have extra people to help. So think, what do you want to do? How long do you want them to stay for? Do they stay all day? Do they go for the morning? I would usually have a meeting at the beginning of the year, and I would explain to the parents, with my EA as well, about our routines, our behaviour management techniques that we use, and really emphasise the idea of confidentiality, that they can't just go and gossip about other children and their needs and what's going on in the room and so on. And I would kind of ban certain parents if need be. You rarely have it, but I did have one year. So there are so many benefits to getting parents in, but a lot of teachers do feel quite anxious about having parents in. So for parents, it increases their confidence. They feel they have an understanding of what's going on at school, and you get to have a good chat with them as well. For children, it helps them understand the links between home and school. Sometimes I find it improves their behaviour because they know that you are talking to mum and dad or their nanny and so on, whoever. It develops a real sense of pride. Some kids, their faces just lit up when their caregivers come and spend some time with them at school. And for the teachers, knowing that you've got certain adults there makes your group work a lot easier to manage. It gives you a bit more time for one-on-one with our individuals, and you can look at how the child and the teacher interact with one another, which is always fascinating. So let's have a quick think about time management when we're working. You want to think, how do you use your dot? So how do you make sure that you're not wasting it? Oh, goodness gracious, I used to waste a whole lot of mine. I would have great conversations with people, but then I'd get back and go, oh, goodness, I was supposed to do this and this. Think about your rosters for different things and how you want to manage those. Think about your indoor and outdoor times. If you're in a single stream school, you don't usually have to worry about your indoor and outdoor time. If you're in a very large school, your playground may not be big enough for all of the children to be out there at the same time. So you're going to have to work out a roster, and you're going to have to work out a plan for when you're indoors and when you're outdoors. You may not be able to roll with a full indoor outdoor time because there may not be enough supervision, or there may not be enough space to be able to do that. And with your time management, think about your whole class times, your small group times, and how you want to organize those in some way. So, quick review. Make sure that you plan effectively, because what it will do, it will help you to think ahead to minimize any behavior issues that you have. You want to plan your environment to best suit the needs of the children, your curriculum, and your personal philosophy. You want to be aware of those really important human resources that you have in your room. And always keep in mind, your EAs are not your personal assistant. You work with them to create the best working environment. And parents are fabulous. You just have to plan when and how you want to use them in the classroom. And do you want them in the classroom? So week 12, we still have our school visits for our tutes. Tuesday, people collect things from ND 36117, return them to ND 36119, and we'll meet at the school at about 1:20. Thursday, people collect and return the things from ND 36119, exactly the same as this week. And then in week 13, our final week is revision. So just have your pack ready to hand to me, printed and collated, with your lesson plan, your reflection, and your assessment notes and data. And I will write a little set of information about that so you're really clear on all of that. And I'll talk that through with you next week as well. So thanks everyone, and I will see you all at the schools next week.